women are spaghetti, men are like waffles. I think that's what it is. Men are waffles, women are spaghetti. And what they mean by that, waffles have these little squares in it, right?
Yeah.
So men can put things in a box. Okay,
Yeah.
that's my work box. That's my home box.
Yeah.
That's my grief box. And I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
close it because it's in the box. Not going to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Women are
Mm-hmm.
like spaghetti. So if you look at a bowl of spaghetti, everything is connected,
Yeah.
right?
Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to my podcast, Renew Motherhood. My name is Blanka Falk. I'm the host of Renew Motherhood, and this episode is how to find the light in your grief. For this episode, I have got an incredible guest here, Bradley Vinson. Please briefly introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from?
Yes, I am Bradley Vinson, also known as Paw Paw to my grandchildren, and I am from the Dallas, Texas area of the USA.
That's great. So I'm always impressed where my guests are coming from. So this is great. Let's just dive into the topic. So it's about grief, and grief is a difficult topic, even though an almost everyday one. I think a lot of people are confronted with it. I'm sure many of the listeners have already lost someone. How did you come up with the topic yourself? What's your story about grief?
Yes, it really came from necessity. In 2016, we had the tragic loss of my 4-year-old granddaughter to an accident. At the time, I was actually in seminary studying to be a marriage ministry leader or men's ministry leader in those kind of areas. And when my granddaughter passed away, I was trying to find ways to help me and my family heal and really couldn't find a lot, especially for grandparents or for men, right? Or for that out of order grief we were experiencing because it was a grandchild. It wasn't a spouse or a parent, right? And so I started researching and creating some of my own content and started serving others that were kind of in my circle, right? Other grandparents, other men. And as time went on, I just kept developing content and getting deeper into that community. So I started developing things to help them in a practical way to deal with their grief. You know, it does have some biblical foundation or some spiritual foundation, but just practical things because I don't really follow the what they call the 5 stages of grief. I don't honestly follow those. And through study, I realized that that's not who that's for. It's not for grievers. It was created for those that were terminally ill. And I think it was just a thing that was adopted to give to grievers because people are looking for instruction.
Yeah,
How do I
always.
do this? And it became popular and people leaned into it because of that. But I never really followed that. So I kept trying to develop and think of things on my own that could help people. That's kind of how it came about. So I created the GRIEVE acronym because I love acronyms. But then I created another one for the HELP method, which are adults that are helping children that are grieving. Because,
Yes.
we're raising 2 of our 4 grandsons, the brothers of the granddaughter that we lost. And as we're working with them and helping them heal, it's like I think other adults and other caregivers could use this information to help children that are grieving that they're caring for. And so that's how I came up with the HELP method to help adults care for grieving children. And that's kind of how it just all kind of came about. And I've been serving in that space since, quite frankly, my granddaughter's death. I mean, it was just a couple of months after she passed away, I was asked to speak to a church. And that's kind of what started the whole process. I gave my testimony and talked about our journey, and it just kept growing and growing from there. So I've been serving this special community since then.
That's great. I think it's always, yes, it's so good if there are some people who have got the strength and can help others in the same situation. Would you say that men are grieving different than women?
I would say we grieve different because we are different, not necessarily that some people see it as we don't grieve or we don't grieve the right way. I'm an air quote user too. I talk with my hands a lot.
Yeah, it's
But
okay.
but but I think because grief is seen as a feminine thing, a feminine emotion, a softer emotion, because it deals with crying and all the other emotions that men hate to emote, right? And so it's like, well, men don't grieve, or men don't grieve the right way. And I tend to say men just grieve differently. We're going to grieve within who we are. And people have to see that for what it is, but then men need to see that for what it is. Because I don't want to just blame the world on how they look at men grieving. I also want to add some emphasis to men saying, no, you have the full spectrum of emotions. Use them. And you have a right to grieve. Stop grieving your manhood and grieve who you lost. Right. And I think, helping men do that, it's like, well, stop grieving your manhood. Stop grieving, well, I failed being a protector. I failed at this or I failed at that. You can only grieve one thing at a time. So you can't honor the loved one that's now gone if you're grieving your manhood. Now, don't push that aside, but see it for what it is. You can't control everything. And we're in a fallen world and things happen. But how are you going to move forward with that? So that's kind of what I help men with, and just acknowledging the fact that, yes, we do grieve differently. And we don't have to grieve like women. We can just grieve, right?
I think it's difficult to say, okay, well, I can imagine, at least, I don't know if it's right, but I can imagine that men have the tendency to suppress those things more, or to put another thing on the top and to say, this is now the most important.
Right.
So the other thing just put aside, like you mentioned, okay.
Well, we
and if it doesn't come
compartmentalize
up,
well. Right. Well, we compartmentalize well. And there's a famous book, I don't want to misquote it, but it talks about how men are like, women are spaghetti, men are like waffles. I think that's what it is. Men are waffles, women are spaghetti. And what they mean by that, waffles have these little squares in it, right?
Yeah.
So men can put things in a box.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my work box. That's my home box.
Yeah.
That's my grief box. And I'm going to close it because it's in the box. Not going to touch it. Women are like spaghetti. So if you look at a bowl of spaghetti, everything is connected, right?
Yes.
Like
a glue.
right. And so it's that kind of thing. So how do you grieve with that, right? It's like, no, we got to get in there and open these boxes, because you got all these boxes all over the place and you haven't opened them. And one day they're going to explode on you. So let's get in that box. Yes, you compartmentalize, but let's get in there. And I use the analogy all the time when I do my presentation on that. Women are circles, men are squares. And so I say it this way, when something happens in society-wise to a woman, we circle the wagons and we get around her and we huddle with her and we get knee to knee, right? Men are more shoulder to shoulder. We're square. It's like, okay, let's go fix a roof. But while we're fixing the roof, hey, man, how's your day going? Hey, man, kind of feel, And so that's not why we're talking. It just happens to be what we're talking about. We're there to fix the roof, right? So it's like, give us something to do together and that will come out. Versus, I want to put all these men in a room. Let's circle up these chairs and talk about grief. It's like, hold up, right? And so that's kind of how it's different. Now, some men do that, and I'm okay with that. I can go do the circle, and I can get vulnerable, and I can speak into it. But all men are not that way, and I think in a general sense, society doesn't expect us to be that way. So we have to find other ways to help men heal. So give us something to do, and then that can be part of us doing, versus let's get together for that purpose, right?
Oh, yes. I love this analogy. This is so great. And I can just see, well, actually the puberty or adolescence boys in my eldest daughter's class, they were just acting different if some problems show up, and how the girls react and how the boys react completely different. And it can be this way if you can let them, right? So if you don't put everyone together and say, okay, now we all get together and we have to solve this in this way, it doesn't work out.
Right.
So I think that's great. I love it. So what was your first reaction when you learned of your granddaughter's death?
Wow. First reaction, it's weird because I remember I was at my office when I got the call because it happened that morning at school for her. And I remember hitting the door sill of my office and damaging my hand. I was like, this can't be real. And I hit the door.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that kind of outburst of whatever it was. And then I went and then it was like, okay, well, we need to get to where she's at. And I kind of got into that do mode,
Mm-hmm.
right? And went home and picked up my wife, and it was a several hour drive to get there, but we're just riding in silence. And it's like, this can't be real. How this happened to her, and all these things. And I think it didn't really come to grips with it, whatever it was I was feeling, because I was like feeling for my wife and feeling for my daughter. And we actually picked up my mom on the way to go see about what was going on. So now I'm feeling for my mother. And so it's all this stuff. And my dad met us to drop off my mom for us to pick her up. And my dad looks at me and he says, I don't know if I can live through this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the first kind of instance where she's gone, right? So we get to the location and, it's just kind of the whirlwind of stuff. And you get through you're frustrated. What adult didn't do what they should have done? That's almost like
Mm-hmm.
almost the immediate feeling when a child passes away. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
what adult was in charge that didn't do their job?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
almost automatic because
Mm-hmm.
children are the innocent of us and they wouldn't do nothing to hurt themselves. So what did an adult not do?
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get that kind of tunnel vision, but then you feel guilt for like, well, last week I could have did this and maybe that didn't happen. And a month ago I could have did that and we wouldn't be here today. And so all those things are going on in my head. But I had to put it in a box. Remember that waffle? I had to put it in a box. And I remember getting there and it happened at school. So we get her to her school and the administration is consoling us and talking to us. And the principal walks up and he says, well, Alana's brother, which is my oldest now grandson, Bryce, he said he doesn't know what happened to his sister. And I think it's only right that you tell him because they're in the same school.
Mm-hmm.
He's 6 at the time. She passed away when she was 4. And so they make a little room for us, and I go in with my grandson. I have to tell him that his sister is not coming home. So I look back on it now, years later, and it's weird because I don't want to say I'm honored because that's not the news you want to give anybody. But I realized the responsibility I was given to literally start my grandson's grief journey.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a powerful moment when I look back on it now, and I can almost recite verbatim the conversation. And because I'm in my mind, how do I explain to a 6-year-old that his sister is not coming home anymore?
Absolutely.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I said, well, because it's like, it's already a surprise for him because Papa doesn't show up to his school. It's in another state.
Mm-hmm.
Papa doesn't just randomly show up at your school on a Wednesday, right? So he was like, okay, hey, Paul, he's excited to see me, but it's like, this is odd, right? And and so I basically tell him and I say, sometimes we fall down and we go to mommy and daddy can fix it. Sometimes we fall down and we have to go to the doctor. I said, sometimes we fall down and we go see God because nobody can fix it. And I said, Alana fell down in a way where she had to go see God and she can't come back. And we're just sitting there in this moment and you don't know how he's going to respond and you don't know if he understands because he's 6 and he just says, thank you, Paul, for telling me, you know,
Wow.
and he hugs me and
Oh,
we cry and he asks me, can I hug her again? And I'm trying to figure out these things and it's just, you look back on it now 8, 9 years later and it's like, that could have went so different and that could have set him on a course that was unhealthy, all those things. So I'm just so thankful for the grace that I was given that day and those words and the ways that I could comfort him in that moment. Because I'm looking back on it now, almost 9 years later, And the journey he's taken started that day. And it could have been so different, you know?
Mm.
So I mean, to go all the way back and answer your question, I don't really know how I felt. I mean, it was just so, how are others feeling was a lot of it. I can't really answer for myself, but even now, trying to think of it, I can't think of the emotion. And I mentioned hitting my hand on the door sill. What was kind of funny about that from a men's grief point of view. My daughter was estranged from her husband at the time, Alana's dad. He wasn't local. So we get there before he did and all those kind of things. When he gets there, his hand is in a bandage because he did a similar thing. He punched the wall or hit something. And I'm looking at his hand and my hand is swollen. And it's like, but that was that male emotion, right?
Yeah.
How do I get this out of me? Whatever that is. And
Yeah.
I hit a wall. He punched something and, fractured this, and it's like, that's the physical, that internal feeling shown in a very physical way that everybody can see. And I noticed that almost, I was like, what's wrong with your hand? He said, when I heard I hit I was like, right. So that universal feeling of it, of that reaction instantly,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I couldn't go ball up in a corner and cry. I couldn't look broken, right? It's like,
You didn't allow yourself in this
right,
situation.
because of all the things of society and manhood and all that stuff instantly came to the front.
Yeah.
Because we emote everything through anger or what I call grumpy, right?
Yeah.
When we're
Yeah.
sad, we act angry. When we're angry, we act angry. When we're scared, we act angry. All these things we emote through anger. And not to sidetrack it, but it was like we were blessed with an opportunity to go on a Disney cruise. And we go to they have an ice cream shop in there. That's the Emotions from the Emotion movie. I forget the name of the movie. The different color people. They had the green for Envy Girl and the red Anger guy and that kind of stuff. And they asked my grandsons, well, which one would you say your grandpa is? And instantly I thought, they're going to pick the red guy. They're going to say, I'm angry. They're going to say, I'm angry.
Okay.
And they said, Pawpaw is the sad one.
Wow.
And this is 4 years into our grief journey together, because they came to live with us within 6-8 months after she passed. They're now living with us, have been with us since then. And I've gone through the grumpy state, and I've gone through the gruff stuff and trying to hide it. And then at some point, I have to show these boys a full spectrum. I got to model it for them and show them that I'm sad and cry in front of them to make it normalized. But I still feel like I've been grumpy, because I've even asked my wife, and I was like, I had a picture of me and my granddaughter, because a couple of months before she died, she came to visit, and we were taking selfies. We were making little funny, goofy faces and stuff like that. And I came across a picture, and I was like, what happened to that guy? Right? And for my grandsons to see through all the gruffness and the agitation sometimes, and they said, no, we picked sad for my pawpaw, not angry. That was powerful.
Wow.
Because they saw through the other stuff.
Yes.
And it's like, no, Pawpaw.
They could feel you, right?
Yep.
They didn't have to see it. They just were connected and said what your feeling was.
Yep.
Really, that's so beautiful.
And so,
wow. So how did you deal with the situation in the coming weeks and months?
Well, I mean, it was a weird time, because I think as the proverbial dust starts to settle, and this is where we are. She's gone. I remember, because we got there first before my ex-son-in-law got there and all that kind of stuff like that. I was doing a lot of the logistical things. So I went to the funeral home. I talked to the school administrators, and, we were doing all that stuff. And I remember, and so when his family finally got there and we all kind of got together and started trying to figure out what we were going to do. I remember we went to the funeral home and we were making arrangements, and I had been through that process before, and knowing that, you have to get all their clothes, even down to the underwear and the socks, right? And you got to, it's though, so it's like, okay, I have to focus on the business side of honoring her life through this memorial service,
Yes.
right? So God's helped me get through these things. Let me get through this box. Let me, I was boxing. Let me get through this box. Let me get to that box. Assignments, right? And I remember driving home to the hotel from the funeral home, and I don't know if your audience is religious but I'm just saying my experience.
Yes.
God audibly talked to me. It was like he was in the car. And my wife and my mom was there. And at first I was like, are they hearing this? Because it was that audible in my head.
Wow.
And God said, what if I asked you when was the best time to have Alana with me? What would you say? And then, so in my mind, I'm like, I don't know. Well, how about when she was 50? How about when she was 100? How about after you died? And I'm like, yes, God, that would have been best. And God said, well, if I asked you when was the best time to have Alana with me, you would say no time would be the best time, wouldn't you? I said, yes, you're right. And then God said, I know. That's why I didn't ask you.
Wow.
And when I tell that story to people, some people are taken back by it, like, why would God say that to you? But to me, that gave me peace, that I'm not in control. I can release myself of some of these guilt things and stuff like that. And also know God didn't take her. We're just in a world where things happen, right? And God knew it was going to happen. I didn't know, he knew the exact moment. I didn't know.
Yes.
But that's not for me to decide those things. And it gave me a peace. Not saying I didn't break down and, because we went shopping for her clothes and I break down in Walmart in the little girls aisle. I'm just standing there hugging clothes and crying.
Oh, yeah.
And just seeing how people are placed in your life, even strangers, to show you compassion. So I'm in the store hugging clothes, crying. So I know I look ridiculous. And one of the workers walks up and she's like, are you okay? I said, no, I'm not okay. I just lost my granddaughter. And she basically guards the aisle for me and lets me stay there, right? And so little things like that along the route where people showed empathy for me helped me in my journey. And that's honestly how I got through it. Even through when I was frustrated and angry with the world for not grieving my granddaughter. Now think about that. The world doesn't even know her. The world don't even know I'm grieving. But I'm frustrated and angry with strangers because they didn't acknowledge her life, a life that they didn't even know existed. That's what grief does to you, right? How dare you be shopping? Don't you know my granddaughter's dead? How dare you be on this freeway with me? Don't you know my granddaughter's dead? How dare you be buying ice cream? Don't you know my granddaughter's dead? And that's how I was feeling. And I had to deal with all those things in the immediacy of my grief and say, I have to honor her life. Even to the point of, so it was almost frustration to frustration to frustration. Because not long after my granddaughter died, Muhammad Ali died. Okay. So great figure, known throughout the world.
Yeah.
But what frustrated me is that I had family members that would black out their Facebook profiles and their Instagram profiles in honor of Muhammad Ali, but wouldn't acknowledge my own granddaughter.
Oh.
And it frustrated me. And I had to mature. And this is all in the immediacy of my grief. I had to mature to a point where that's not their journey, it's mine.
Mm-hmm.
I can't force other people to be grieving my grief. That's my
Mm-hmm.
granddaughter. Yes, I have cousins and uncles and aunts and friends, but that's not, they don't have the relationship with her that I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't put the expectation of them grieving like I'm grieving on them. But I'm not going to lie, it hurt that they would
Yeah.
acknowledge a stranger, athlete. I mean, he's a great
Mm-hmm.
man, philanthropist, but they
Mm-hmm.
didn't know him. They never met him. They
Yeah.
never went to a birthday party for him.
Mm.
They never went to family reunion with him.
Yes.
She was
Yes.
there. She
Yeah.
was there. But you're gonna black out your Facebook profile for him and not even say a word about her.
Mm-hmm.
So that was hard. But that was the first. That was the immediacy of my grief and the early parts of the journey of my grief that I had to deal with because my body was remembering things too. I finally
Yes.
went back to work and tried to get through a day of work because I was in I call it a fishbowl office. So most of the wall was glass. So everybody could
Mm-hmm.
walk by and see me all day long. Nice
Yeah.
office, but it was a
Yeah.
fishbowl, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had a beautiful view of downtown Dallas. And so I would turn my chair to the window and cry so people couldn't see me crying. Or I'd go find a little nook behind my solid wood door where people
Mm-hmm.
couldn't see me as they walked down the hall, and I'd stand there and cry. But what hit me the most is when I could finally, the day was finally over, I get in my car and I started going down the parking garage. And by the time I got to the bottom, I couldn't leave. I was just shaking and crying because my body
Mm-hmm.
remembered the
Mm-hmm.
last time you did this, you were leaving to go pick up your wife to go see about your dead granddaughter. My body
Mm-hmm.
remembered that drive, that circular drive. And every
Yes.
day I was re-traumatizing myself just to go to
Wow.
work. Every day my phone
So,
rang at the office. I was afraid I was getting a call about somebody else dying
yeah,
because,
I can totally relate to this.
and even today, if I get a call
Mm.
during business hours and it's from a family member,
Mhm.
I remember May 11th, 2016, and we're
Wow.
9 years in. If I get a call right now between the hours of 8 and 5 and I see a family member's name on my phone,
Mm.
I'm right back to that day.
Wow. It's a long process. So what would you say? What is your number one piece of advice for parents who have lost their child? Is there anything that you can give them?
It's That's a hard one, and I think at a certain level, when for their own grief, not you know, because I'm not sure if
Yeah.
they have other children or not, but for their own grief, we have to get to a point where we have to put our oxygen mask on first,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to lean into our grieving process. Yes, it's out of order grief, and there's like layers to it, and I'll say this, in grief, pain is a given. Suffering is optional and is usually
Mm-hmm.
self-inflicted.
Mm-hmm.
So in the loss of my granddaughter, I still feel pain today. That's a given. It's going to happen. I get good days and bad days.
Mm-hmm.
Suffering, I can almost guarantee I've always done it to myself.
Oh, wow.
The coulda, shoulda, wouldas, the why didn't I, the
Mm-hmm.
guilt, I'm supposed to be a protector. I'm supposed to be not allowing this to happen. And all that suffering, grieving my manhood, all that suffering, I did it to myself. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when we lose children, pain, lean into it because grief naturally takes you towards healing, but you have to give yourself some grace and put, not make yourself suffer.
Mm-hmm.
You suffering is not honoring their life.
Yeah.
Pain is a natural occurrence because you love much, you're going to grieve much, you're going to
Yeah.
hurt, but don't make yourself suffer because the pain
Mm-hmm.
already is enough. Why
Yeah.
add to it
It
and
is.
make it even worse? I
Yeah.
think that's the number one thing. Also, I think we have to realize that, especially as a parent, and you might have a spouse or ex-spouse or whatever it is. Everybody's relationship is different. Everybody lost something different. And with
Mm-hmm.
that, I had to learn that because my wife and I, yes, we lost a granddaughter. But one day she walked up to me and she said, I just realized the legacy of motherhood is now broken.
Oh, wow.
And as a man, I never would have thought of that. Zero.
Mm-hmm.
But to my wife, it was particularly different. She's like, there's no more mothers in our bloodline because we have all
Mm-hmm.
grandsons,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that was powerful for me to hear my wife say that. Also, grieving the loss of a child, there's ways we can grieve together and we can lean on each other. And then there's ways that we have to grieve alone.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be okay with that as a couple,
Mm-hmm.
right? Very important. Another thing is that the the idea that we are the only person that can help our spouse heal. Now, we should be the number one in line physically here on earth, outside of our
Mm-hmm.
spiritual and God. We should be the number one person in line, but we shouldn't act like we're the only one that can help them.
Mm-hmm.
She might go out with some other ladies and get
Mm-hmm.
some healing in a way that I could never give her. Me and the guys might go out to Buffalo Wild Wings or whatever like that. And or go build a wheelchair ramp, right? I'm a
Mm-hmm.
chaplain now. I'm a fire and police chaplain. I'm an emergency crisis
Mm-hmm.
response chaplain. And we go out as a chaplain group and serve others who are hurting. That's
Mm-hmm.
helping me heal, to help and work with strangers. All right.
Yes, yes.
My wife has a circle of close ladies, friends that she is in because of her grief, right?
Yeah.
That's the difference between me and her. But we both are getting that
Yeah.
healing from that, right? And so we have to be okay with our spouse and others when we have a shared loss to heal separate from us because our journeys are different. They go like this.
Yes.
Parts of it we're together because we grieve Alana, but
Mm-hmm.
she's grieving motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that,
Yeah.
right? But I grieve, you know, maybe being able to walk her down the aisle as that second gentleman, right? Or,
Mm-hmm.
helping her buy that pageant dress or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
so things that she wouldn't necessarily relate to, but I would, right? Or going to the
Right.
father-daughter, grandpa-granddaughter dance. When that
Mm-hmm.
announcement comes out every year, I'm like, wow, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's a separate journey. That's not my
It
wife's
is.
grief. That's mine, right? And
Right.
so,
Yes.
and one thing that I thought was very powerful, it was actually an old coworker of mine that I see as a friend, or really saw as a friend then. But he said something very unfriendly to me,
Oh.
and he said, "I haven't. I don't know anyone that has had a relationship that has survived this child loss."
Okay.
And this is when I first came back to work,
Mm-hmm.
and first I'm like, how dare he say that to me? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like it was expecting for our relationship to be broken
Mm-hmm.
because the loss of our granddaughter.
Mm-hmm.
Now my daughter's, unfortunately, her relationship was already broken before she passed away. So theirs didn't have a chance to survive it or not. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But I can see how that can happen because sometimes you can feel you're grieving in isolation and separately. And quite
Mm-hmm.
frankly, and I do believe this to an extent, mothers have a connection with their children at conception. Men have a connection to their children at birth. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not a negative thing because they just physically can't see the baby and bond, right? but the
Right.
baby's growing inside the mother. There's just a different
Yeah,
connection there.
it is.
So in law, and I don't push back on that. I don't count it as a negative thing. It's just different. But
It's
I also
different.
don't
Yes.
want women to see it as, oh, his love is not less. It's just different,
No, it's
right?
different. Right.
And
Absolutely.
and so when the loss happens, sometimes that individual journey can prevent the joint journey from being healthy,
Mm.
right? Because I love this baby for an extra 9 months,
Mm-hmm.
or when it's stillborn
Mm-hmm.
and the husband's loss doesn't feel as deep because he never held the baby and saw the baby, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
Absolutely.
there's other feelings that come in. I really want to push back against that and tell people we have to have compassion for each other for
Yeah.
their own journey.
Right.
Because I've met men that were grieving the loss of what is perceived as a healthy child. A man that was deeply grieving because his child was special needs.
Mm-hmm.
Alive, but special needs.
Mm-hmm.
He was grieving the idea of having a child he could play with and do, you know what I mean? The
Yes.
man stuff,
Yes. Yes.
physical
Yes.
stuff, the
Right.
toss him
Right.
in the air and, wrestle with it, and it's like, and he's grieving not being able to bond with his child that way. That's a
Mm-hmm.
grief.
Mm-hmm.
And we spend so much time fighting each other on that individual journey versus the parts that we can share, making that so
Mm-hmm.
strong where the individual part can still be healthy too.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so
I
that's what
love this idea.
right. And
Yeah.
I want to encourage people in that way. It's like that individual part of the journey. I'm not saying it doesn't concern you, but love them
Mm-hmm.
through that.
Mm-hmm.
So that joint part of the journey can be stronger. Don't
Yeah.
resent the individual part. Right.
Right. Yes, that's it. So we are made for each other, but still we have got different ways to go
Right.
and different feelings or different paths to live,
Right.
but still also together. So, and there has to be a way, a healthy way to deal with this situation. And I always believe there is a way to go.
There is.
So, yeah, so having lost my husband myself, I fall into grief. If I fall into grief too long, I can bring myself back by realizing that this is selfish because my husband is in a better place now. And out of love, I should wish that for him. So what is your view on this? Can it be selfish to grieve?
Think I call that the dichotomy of the flesh man and the spiritual man.
Mm-hmm.
Because the spiritual part of me, the believer part of me, know there is no better place than in the bosom of our loving God. No better place. The flesh man of me thinks there's no better place for my granddaughter to be than right here by my side.
Yeah.
And I battle
That's
with
it.
that, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
both, right?
Yes.
Excuse my allergies.
Yes.
And so I
Yeah.
battle with that because I'm both.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing they're in a better place, but yearning for them to be here. And I think, so I wouldn't say grief is selfish. I think in this way, I think it this way. Because they are released from the physical body. They're all spirit now.
Mm-hmm.
And their spirit is so big and floating around and just, it's not being held by the shell of a body.
Mm-hmm.
Our spirit is still being held by the shell of a body.
Mm-hmm.
And our spirit wants their spirit, and that pulling makes us have pain.
Yeah.
Because our spirit is just wanting to get out to them, but it's held in this shell. And that's where that ache and that pain comes from. And so, yes, I grieve my granddaughter heavily, but grief is biblically it says, do not grieve as an unbeliever because they have no hope, as a person that has no hope.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't say don't grieve. It said don't grieve like those that have no hope. So I have hope But I define it as this. Just because I know how the story ends does not mean I don't get to cry at the sad parts.
Yes.
And so that's what gives me grace to grieve. And I am more than happy I'm always envisioning what that's like and what she experienced when she got there and saw ancestors that I never met and my grandparents and great grandparents that only spent very few years of my youth with. She's now with them, right? And she's now feeling that. And I feel her and I even feel them because of maybe through her as a conduit, because I know what she's experiencing. But I want her here. I miss her.
Yeah.
Every day there's an empty chair at the dinner table. Every day. Every time we go out and get ice cream, we're getting one less ice cream than we should have been getting. Every time we go out to dinner, we're buying one less dinner than we should have been getting. So I miss her. But that's the flesh man, right?
Yeah.
And then the spiritual man comes in and says, she's okay.
Yeah.
It's like I was at my dad's deathbed and I was thanking him for being a good dad. The cancer had started moving to his brain, but he could still have semi-decent conversations, one or two words. And I was just thanking him for being a good dad to me. And I wanted to, I want to move through life with the things he's taught me. And he said, thank you. And we kind of got a little giggle out of that. Because it's like a sentimental kind of moment. He's like, thank you. Well, because I told him, was a good dad to me. Then he said, you're going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And I realized what he meant by that. At some point, I am going to be okay. And soon, he's going to be okay because he's going to be with the Lord.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful.
And so, because he knew. And so those are just what I call those little God winks, right? And so we get those along the way to let us know that our grieving is not in vain, because it shows that we loved, but it lightens. We carry the load differently. We maneuver through this world differently, and we can shine a light on others that are starting the journey when they're in that deep darkness, right? Sadness is up the mountain from where I'm from. I'm in deep grief. I don't even know what sad is. But because I've been there, I can say, hey, sad is coming. Just hold on. Sad is coming. And you're like, sad? Yeah, because right now you might feel devastated. And sad is like winning the Olympics.
Yeah.
All right? Yes. So it's like, it's coming. It's okay. Sad is coming. And then...
So, yeah. But there is no way to be prepared, is there?
No way, because...
You just have to go through it and, yes.
You got to go through it. And I say grief naturally takes you towards healing. You have to lean in. You can't be a waffle, put everything in boxes. You got to lean in. But it will naturally...
Can you be a spaghetti?
Right. Got to be more spaghetti. And so it will naturally take you towards healing. I truly believe that. Grief is a tool to naturally take you towards healing. Now, healing is not, I'm cool, everything is fine. Here's what's amazing about what I call healing. Because I used to tell people, always healing, ing, never healed, ed, on this side of eternity. I used to say that all the time. And I realized one day I was lying to people. Oh. And I had to confess because I thought about it differently. God put this on my mind to think about it differently. You can't be healed, ed, on this side of eternity. Just like when you have, think about when you have a surgery and the doctor gets in there and he might cut something out or mend something together, whatever else. The doctor says you're healed. But you look down and there's stitches or there's a scar. And then that might heal, but then it itches every now and then. Or you might even, in your mind's eye, feel the pain of being cut. Even though you were put to sleep, you're like, I was cut there. And the pain jumps on you, the phantom pain. But you're healed. But there's all these remnants of work being done in the process of you healing. Right?
Right.
So God knows the void that was left in your life from the person that's now gone. He knows the exact dimensions of it. He knows how to fill it and heal it. But what has to happen, you got to give him access to it.
Yeah.
He won't make you heal. You got to give him access.
Mm-hmm.
And I started telling people, it's like, yes, you can be healed. That doesn't mean I forgot. That doesn't mean there won't be scars. We're all an accumulation of our scars. And even when the doctor says, I'm going to heal you of that, you got a tumor, I'm going to help you heal, they have to cut you and wound you to heal you.
Yes.
And it's like, when you relate that to grief, you can see, yes, I can be healed. It doesn't mean I forgot that I was ever broken in that spot. It doesn't mean that the scars will go away. There's always a sign of the work being done, but I'm healed, right? And
you know what pops up in my mind is just the story about the footprints in the sand. Do you know this?
Yes.
So, yeah, do you like to tell?
Well, the story of the footprints in the sand, and people relate it to a biblical thing. It's like, so on your journey of life, God is walking with you. So there's two sets of footprints in the sand, right? And
yes,
then,
right.
And so the person's looking at their life and they see these two sets of footprints. And then there's one set of footprints. And they're like, well, God, you said you were walking with me and I see two sets of footprints. What does this single set of footprints mean? Did you leave me? And God says, no, that's why I was carrying you.
But it didn't feel like this,
Didn't feel like it, right?
Yeah.
And
that's
so
the miracle here.
That's the miracle of it all. You don't realize you're being carried. You're just moving forward.
Yes. Especially if it's getting hard, if it's getting tough. You think you are alone, but you're not.
And sometimes I add a little joke to that. And it's like, well, there's another little part of the path where you see these little two grooves going through the sand. They're like, well, what do these two grooves look like? It's like, well, that's when I had to drag you kicking and screaming to where I wanted you to go. Right. And so, and so sometimes we have to go through that, right? Well, I don't want that. And God is like, no, you're struggling like a toddler. And he just has to drag you to where we're going to get there. You might not like it. And you're just struggling with me too much to carry you right now. But we're going to get there. Right?
Yeah.
It's like the kid.
I always think, okay, if I give him access, it goes faster.
Right.
Then if I get the resistance in front, so it takes longer.
Indeed. Yeah.
So let's go.
Got to give him access. And I even related to this, like even in the more practical sense, okay, you've been healthy all your life, whatever else. Think of getting a cut or a scratch and you put a Band-Aid on it to protect it. Because I don't want to bump it on the table and hurt it, right? But if you leave the Band-Aid on too long, what happens? It gets all yucky and gooey and stuff like that. You got to take the Band-Aid off and let some air hit it, or what I call let God breathe on it.
Oh, yeah.
And it might get crusty. You might get a scab. The scab falls off and it's a scar. But you got to let God breathe on it. You can't keep your grief covered up and not let people see it and afraid it's going to bump into somebody and afraid is, you got to air it out. Let God breathe on it and then to heal it.
That's it.
So healing is possible. Being healed, ED, is possible. That doesn't mean the absence of the pains and the phantom pains and the itchy spots from the stitches. And when we get to heaven, God's going to say, I know the names of all those scars. Because we're all an accumulation of our scars. That's what our stories are.
Yes.
And so stop avoiding the scars, right?
Yes.
What's so powerful about it?
So, Bradley, you have also written a book. How is it called and where can people buy it?
Yeah, I've actually written 3 books.
Oh, wow.
It's been kind of cool. But the first book is a book that's actually other people's grief stories. And it's called Good Grief, Stories of Hope and Healing. And they're all true stories of people on their grief journey. But the 2 books that I physically wrote that are all my content, one of them is called The Help Method, which is a guide for helping adults caring for grieving children. And one is the GRIEVE Method, which is a guide for those that are on the journey of grief. And both of those are available on Amazon, but they can find them on my website, bradleyvinson.com, which is basically myname.com. Look in the
Yes,
resource
I will
section. It'll
put
be
this
there.
in the
Yeah.
description that people can find it. That's so great. But if people say, okay, Bradley is such a good helping hand, can they get in touch with you? Where can they find you? Also through your website, or
Yes.
what would you
I'm on,
suggest?
my website is the easiest spot, but I'm also on LinkedIn. I have a little TikTok thing when I do little short videos about grief. No dancing.
Oh, great. No dancing.
No dancing.
Okay.
And I have a YouTube channel. Yeah, but the
Yeah,
easiest
your
place,
granddaughter is
yeah,
missing.
right, right. The easiest way is through my website. I kind of have that as the hub of all the information, even the social media links and things there. Please be my friend. Just, you can just say be a friend and I'll connect with you. And I have free resources there and just things that I help people with.
Great. Thank you so much for talking about this topic, which is a tough one, but you made it very, tangible, I would say.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for being my guest here. And all the listeners, please stay tuned, subscribe, and follow this channel.